Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in Founders Week YQG. It is an exciting day 3, and we have an exciting workshop for you today. Just a couple things I would like to mention. While this event is virtual, we would like to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. We are grateful to work, learn, and live in this area. This week would not have been made possible without our generous sponsors, so I would like to take a second to thank them. The Province of Ontario, the St. Clair College Alumni Association, the Job Shop, Libero Credit Union, Workforce WindsorEssex, Baker Tilly Windsor LLP, Alpha Core Group, WindsorEssex, EPICentre, Small Business and Entrepreneurship Center, Genesis Entrepreneurship Center, and WEtech Alliance. Thank you for putting #Founders first. To learn more about WEtech Alliance, please join us at 3 p.m. during the Leveraging the WindsorEssex Entrepreneurship Support Ecosystem. And just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. Today we are leveraging Zoom webinar, so you will have plenty of opportunity to engage with our guests using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And should you experience any technical difficulties, please send us a message in the chat box. Now I would like to welcome our moderator, Andreas Waller, on stage. He is a multilingual business leader and partnership facilitator advising CEOs internationally. He has held leadership roles in Canada, United States, Sweden, and Germany. Currently, he leads market development and technology partnerships for global corporations and SMEs. He is a recognized business leader who understands the importance of ESG and strategic solutions for the future, who is an active entrepreneurial development internationally and in local ecosystems. Thank you for joining us today, Andreas. On behalf of Founders Week YQG, welcome.
Thank you, Shreya, for that generous introduction. So I'm here today to give a brief overview of first my organization, OCI, and then introduce our main speaker and then moderate the Q&A session in this segment that we call Ask Me Anything About IP. So as Business Development and Commercialization Manager, I represent OCI, Ontario Centre of Innovation, in the WindsorEssex Chatham-Kent region by providing guidance to OCI clients to access our services. So if this was a real face-to-face seminar, you would have stopped me and said, hey, wait a minute, who are these clients you talk about? Well, the simple answer, it's you. Any corporation that is registered in the province of Ontario are our clients, which is why there are over 12 business development managers spread out across the province. We are the boots on the ground for OCI. OCI's vision is prosperity from innovation. OCI's mission is to accelerate innovation through game-changing research leading to successful commercialization and vibrant collaboration between industry and academia, launching the next generation of products and jobs. OCI's mandated role by the province of Ontario is to develop and deliver programs that accelerate the development, commercialization, and adoption of emerging technologies to drive job creation. One of the ways we achieve this mandate is by creating strategic partnerships that benefit OCI clients and are complementary to the organization's vision and mission. So besides grant programs, OCI also invests in promising startups and small businesses. Our investment portfolio contains companies that are less than 5 years old, has a strong IP which has been created at an academic institution by students or professors, and where the company has been involved with the local CLA, the Campus Linked Accelerator. So in our region, we have 2 CLAs. One is at the University of Windsor, that's called EPICentre, and the other one is at the main campus of St. Clair College, and that's called Genesis. So this fund is called Market Readiness and is a comparative investment fund where OCI co-invests up to $250,000 in each startup. So IP is of great value to a country's global competitiveness and one of the cornerstones to sustainable economic development. And this is why OCI has partnered with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, also known as Sipo, to help Ontario startups and SME communities with awareness of IP and why it matters to every commercially viable idea and company. So it is therefore my great pleasure to introduce Dumitru Olariu, Intellectual Property Advisor at Sipo, who will give us an overview of the different kinds of IP. Mr. Olariu has a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering and a Master of Business Administration. He has worked with Sipo as a patent examiner and then as an IP advisor based first in Montreal, then in Vancouver, and now in Toronto. Before joining Sipo, he worked for 6 years in the electronics industry. So, Dumitru, please enlighten us. Why should small business owners and entrepreneurs we have in the audience today care about IP?
Okay, thank you, Andreas. Thank you for your kind introduction. Why you care about IP? The short answer is it's valuable. It's very valuable asset a business might have, especially when you make it work in sync with your business strategy. That's why it's so important to set up some sort of intellectual property strategy that will complement the business strategy. A few words about Sipo, Canadian Intellectual Property Office, is an agency, federal government agency with innovation, science, and industry, Canada. And it's the main organization that administers main types of intellectual property in Canada. There are patents, trademarks, copyright, industrial designs, integrated circuits, topographies. Sipo has also a mandate to educate and make people aware of intellectual property, how the system works, to take advantage of the system, because they might know more about intellectual property, how it works, make wise business decisions based on intellectual property aspect of a business, and ultimately using more the intellectual property system. And why I'm saying that is because statistically, actually, companies taking good care of their intellectual property assets, they perform better. They experience than the others who don't have like a proper, let's say, a sound intellectual property management system. They perform better. They experience growth much more. They also are more ready to export. And what's very important also is they are able to secure and financing much better. So with this in mind, let me share two screens that I would like to why you should care about intellectual property. That would be the first screen. Intellectual property works like a monopoly, so to speak. You have a say on the creations covered by intellectual property. So you have an edge over the competition. It gives you a competitive advantage. You also, intellectual property helps you build a reputation and goodwill with your partners, clients, and I will say even with your own employees, because employees feel more secure if they work for a company that takes good care of intellectual property assets of the company. How you can use basically intellectual property is to attract financing, strategically achieve your business goals, and we'll probably talk more about that when we'll talk about intellectual property strategy, and secure your markets because you have that that monopoly that I mentioned. Second slide, when you are thinking about an intellectual property strategy, you have to start with the basics. The basics will consist in understanding what are the main differences between main types of intellectual property. In Canada, you have these 5 main types of intellectual property. You start with an idea, but based on an idea, you create something. So intellectual property might be defined as a creation of the mind. If that creation, let's say, it's a sign that it's used to differentiate products and services from those of other companies, they work like trademarks. So they are also known as brands. And brands might be words, designs, sounds, scents, tastes, holograms, moving images, textures. Patent right covers inventions from technological scientific field. They are product, process, machine compositions that are new, useful, and inventive. Trade secrets here, the creation of the mind might be anything that gives you a competitive advantage and you may keep it confidential or secret. Might be product related, as for patents, might be a machine, a process, might be just trade related, list of suppliers, potential client lists, business plans, and any other kind of trade-related information that gives you a competitive advantage. Copyright covers creations from the cultural field, and they might be literary, artistic, dramatic, musical works. Computer programs basically are considered text, so it's covered by copyright. And last and not least, industrial designs as a main form of intellectual property found in Canada covers the visual aspect of a product. Any original shape, configuration, pattern, ornament applied to a finished article. So let's start with that because this is like the basics of planning for an intellectual property strategy. You look at what you have and then try to make like an inventory of what you have and make a so-called intellectual property internal audit, just to have an idea what you have and how they might help you for your business.
Great, thank you, Dumitru. So my reflection on that is difference between intangible and tangible assets. Intangible being ideas and systems, and tangible assets is buildings and physical assets. And one of the areas that is very important is the buildup of intangible assets, such as IP in this case, in order to but I think in also to look at the intangible assets such as IP as an asset rather than a cost center. And I think a lot of times we are blinded by the apparent cost of IP, and we then think about patenting of an idea. But this is sort of the same thing as an investment of a building, etc. Right?
Yeah, I have a comment on that, if I may.
Yep.
So different types of intellectual property, they have different lifespans. They work differently. So it's important to know how each type of intellectual property works. Also, the cost involved. To obtain a patent is quite expensive and takes long. So it has to make business sense to obtain a patent. Trademark is different, the same industrial design. different lifetimes, different costs. And you'll always have to ask you how much it will cost me, what would be my benefit. So you have to analyze your intellectual property assets, how they can help you to your business. So IP strategy, the general definition is you make some actions, and you put in place some methods to maximize the value of your intellectual property assets to your business goals. So to just have an impact.
Very good.
That.
So I have a technical, I think we have a technical issue, a little bit of a background noise. Are you able to switch from headphones to your laptop? There's some whistling noise in the background. Maybe we can try it. See that. So, no, I think IP is important, but for the part of the audience that thinks, well, do I really need to worry about it? Is my company special enough to worry about IP? And what would you say to them that they think that, well, it's not a typical IP area? Oh, you're on mute. Now we can't hear you. I'm sorry. Maybe that was a bad idea. Yeah. Let's see if we can get back the audio with Dumitru here.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah, let's keep it here where we can actually hear you.
All right. Sorry about that. So intellectual property is worth it. In a very few cases, let's say you base your strategy not on your intellectual property component. So you will have like the advantage of the first entrant into a market, and you don't care much about securing your intellectual property in that particular market. However, it's also important not to infringe on someone else's intellectual property rights. So you should be very careful what kind of intellectual property strategy you'll adopt. But it's true. Some people simply decide not to file and obtain intellectual property rights. So, but they want to have that peace of mind, that freedom of operation. What they can do is in terms of patents, they disclose an invention. They don't obtain a patent, but they stop the others of obtaining the patent rights for the same thing. So that's a strategy that is quite legit.
Right, and one area of where IP is easy to obtain is copyright. As I understand it, if you post something on social media, let's say you create a picture or you create a graphic and you post it on the internet, and either you put a copyright of yourself on it, or if you don't, is there a difference there? And
actually,
is that more
copyright.
of a
Yeah, there is some sort of due diligence that you should apply in terms of copyright. First, the creator has copyright. Unless the creator has an obligation to assign the copyright to the employer or to someone else, you have a contractual agreement. So copyright is automatically acquired at the moment you create something.
Yep.
You may register the copyright, and it's advisable to do so. The registration system in Canada is quite straightforward. What you mentioned, that when you post something, it's good practice to mention that that particular work is copyrightable, and you acknowledge who is the owner of the copyright and the year that work was created. That's a proper marking of your copyright work. That would consist in due diligence. Due diligence will mean to keep a copy of what you created as well and date it that you might use like a proof of ownership. But the registration will be sufficient to prove that you have ownership, and also much easier to enforce your copyright. I advise you to go on our website, Sipo's website, in a special site called IP for Business, where you have a so-called IP toolbox, and you have fact sheets on each type of intellectual property and what steps you should take and in order to properly manage that particular type of intellectual property copyright in this case.
Great. And I should also mention for the attendees that if you would like to ask your question verbally, you're more than welcome to, as well as typing it in. And I think that's one of the reasons I brought up the market readiness and program and our collaboration with Sipo is that as Jim Balzilli's report way back when noted was that Canadian corporations need to protect their IP better or have more IP, basically, to be able to be globally competitive in the marketplace, to defend their position, and also to work with partners that are like-minded in their IP strategy, because the world is not similar, or the world is not the same everywhere. Different countries have different ways of protecting or enforcing IP. So can you speak a little bit about on the international scale, what's happening at Sipo? Is there a lot of things happening?
Yeah, of course. We are cooperating with other intellectual property offices in the world and try to harmonize our legislation. Sipo actually promotes Canada's intellectual property interests in different international fora. But in terms of your IP strategy, you should keep in mind that all these types of intellectual property, probably with the exception of copyright, but they are territorial. So you go in a foreign market, you should play by the rules, intellectual property rules of that country, and they differ sometimes. So you should take good care to understand how the system works there in order to take advantage of the system.
Right. And also make sure that
we have guides. We have guides for different countries, for European Union, for India, for China, for United States, Mexico. So I advise you to go in, again, that particular side of our website called IP for Business, and look on the international guides. And we explained there briefly the main differences that exist between Canadian system and a particular intellectual property system in another country. So you'll be well prepared how to manage your strategy in that country. And we are talking about the strategy we have there, and I invite you to go there to see a so-called IP strategy assessment tool. So you answer couple of questions there, and the result in the end will be like what kind of IP strategy you should adopt. We also have e-learning modules suggesting you a 6-step intellectual property strategy. So the first step I mentioned, intellectual property audit, but internal audit. You may make like a second step would be an external audit. I mean, looking at your competition, what the intellectual property should be of concern for you in the same field of activity. And then the third step would be to analyze what would be the gaps, the opportunities that you have, and then make a plan, like the fourth step, a plan on acquiring intellectual property or disposing intellectual property, how will you use, if you'll be offensive or defensive in your strategy. And then you'll implement that plan, and you'll periodically reassess, like the last step in a good intellectual property strategy, you'll reassess or realign your strategy based on what's happening at different points in time.
Great. So we have a question from one of the attendees. So the question is, IP is critically important. However, for many startups, it is cost prohibitive. What advice do you have? And I was thinking about when you if you want to touch on the subject of your services, and it sounds very comprehensive, but it also sounds very the price tag for your services is it very high, or can you comment on that? The services of Sipo.
Of course, yeah. For the startups, we advise them to do in terms of due diligence at a very small cost or no cost at all almost, is to go through the so-called IP inventory checklist and see what kind of actions you may take or consider. And I advise you to make like a short list of all your intellectual property assets and roughly how much they contribute to your business strategy. You put them, you try to evaluate them. And you can do it yourself. You don't have to ask a specialist. Of course, it's better to ask someone who is specialized in the domain to do a proper intellectual property audit. But simple steps, you may work with our intellectual property inventory checklist and then make that kind of table and work with some sort of valuation process and putting a money value on your intellectual property assets. That's how you can start the process. If you would like to obtain a formalized form or another of intellectual property, you apply. So if you apply for registering a trademark, you can do it yourself. You can ask a professional to do it. If you can take the time to learn how to do it yourself, you have a tutorial on our website. It's quite straightforward. For patents, it's a more specialized domain. I don't advise you to do it yourself. However, it's possible, and we have a tutorial on that. And if you put enough time and effort, I think you can do a good job as well.
And it's not always IP is not always the patent. It may be a trade secret. It may be your special secret recipe that you keep safely put away somewhere. That is your IP, right?
Right.
So that's the kind of distinction you have to make. Which way should I go? Each way has their advantages and disadvantages. And so another question that came up is, when is the right time to consider IP protection? And I think I know the answer, but, but
it depends on each type of intellectual property.
Right.
Yeah. A good practice is to keep a record, like a diary, of what you create and see what forms of intellectual property would be applicable to your creation. For example, if you have an invention, the right time to apply for a patent is after you create a prototype. And we say that in our guide to patents.
Right.
Because at that time, you'll be able to fully describe the invention. That's your obligation in order to obtain that monopoly, that it's the patent right. So you have to fully describe the invention. And without a prototype, it won't be possible.
Right. But I think, well, if I look at it from my point of view, the consider IP protection is from day one. That's when if you have the idea, how do you protect your IP? Well, of not disclosing to everyone what your idea is maybe a good idea. But it really comes with, what is the purpose of the company as well? What is the secret sauce, the secret recipe, the way the company operates, or the way we handle customers, etc. I mean, it could be a myriad of different things. And I would, from my perspective, I would say from day one, you need to think about IP, because IP is the kind of a soul of the company, right?
Yeah. And anyway, a proper management, IP management would be to keep a record of what you do.
Exactly.
And who owns. And who owns. And then keep it secret, take measures to keep it confidential, non-disclosure agreements.
Great. So I got another question coming up. What are the elements of protecting a brand, whether personal or business? And so if you can speak on that a bit.
Brands might be words, design, sounds, as I mentioned. These are the traditional brands, but it may be scents, tastes, holograms. In Canada, there is an obligation of use of your brand in order to have basic protection under common law and also keep the registration in good standing. So that you have to keep in mind. When you apply for a trademark registration, you have to submit the products and services that are covered by that particular trademark, identified by that trademark. And you should identify all these products and services. You also have to see what trademark makes good business sense for you. So it's good practice even to consult a branding specialist, because they are familiar with your field of activity, and they might tell you if you are aim for a high-end, let's say, clientele, they will tell you what kind of brand you should have in mind. And how to devise a brand. You have to put a bit of effort on what would be my brand, because you'll stick with that brand for years, and your customers will be accustomed to that image or word, and will associate the quality of your products and services. So you have to be carefully what you'll choose as a brand, a trademark, and then register. It's advisable. Again, it's territorial. So if you go in a foreign market, you should register in that particular market as well.
Right. And another next question here is, and I think the question is about patent more than generally IP, but the question is, but the cost of IP is high. We heard it's a minimum $20,000 for search, layer, and application. Most of startups do not have that money at the beginning. Is there any grant that can be used for IP? So, and I think I can answer that from OCI's perspective. No, there isn't any specific grant that covers the cost of IP from our side, and that's, that is a hurdle. But from your perspective, how can you leverage that? We talked about IP is important for your ability to raise money. And what's the progress then? Is it something that is patentable but is kept a secret? How do you move
what you
there?
can do? A lot of patent agents advise their clients to file for a so-called US provisional patent application. You start the process, and you have that particular date that it's quite important, because the patenting system right now, almost all over the world, is whoever files first gets the patent. So it's important to secure that first date, and you can do that with a US provisional patent application. But you have to keep in mind, this makes you save time, a year. So within 1 year, you should get some sort of financing and make up your mind if you'll transform that provisional patent application in a full-fledged so-called utility patent applications, non-provisional. So 1 year probably is enough. Investors will look at what you have. If you want to it's dangerous to disclose your invention to potential investors, but you can do that. You can do by explaining a little bit what is the end result of your invention, not fully disclosing and how the invention is built and how it works. So,
but and there's also the standard NDA, non-disclosure agreement that would protect you as well. But I understand.
Indeed.
Yeah. So the cost for a provisional application is, considerably lower than a full.
Right.
Right. Okay.
With the caveat, because you'll not get protection with the provisional.
That's right. So,
yeah.
But it gets you
start the process. Yeah.
So another question, what are the top mistakes you see founders make when it comes to IP? That's a good question. The top mistake.
Top mistakes would be the early disclosure. early disclosure is not good. Or you try to sell the product just to make sure if it will fly or not. That's not good. You have to keep in mind, Canada and United States, they have a grace period in terms of patenting of 1 year. But it's not advisable to be used, and you may lose your right in other jurisdictions. Yeah. So that would be like a huge mistake of disclosing and your invention or other kind of information. So you have to make up your mind. Another mistake, a lot of people are exporting to China because they have a powerful brand in Canada and it's here registered. And they make the assumption that in China, the trademark system works the same. It's not. So you have to register first.
Yeah, I think that awareness is universal. You should know the market that you're getting yourself into, and there are rating systems, and the information is out there, and I can share it if anyone is interested to make sure that you know with open eyes what you're getting yourselves into. Yeah. Great. And I would also say that the ecosystem that we have in Ontario does address these issues of what not to do with our accelerators, our incubators, as I mentioned, the CLAs that we have throughout. Those have elements of that advice that are readily and freely available to startups. So another question from Siamak is there any way that the lawyer applies for any governmental grant for the IP and patent registration, and he or she takes his or her portion of it on it and spends the rest on the registration? So and I think this question is regarding the integrity of the lawyer. You should have a clear understanding.
Patent and trademark agents and lawyers, they are registered and they have like a code of conduct, a code of ethics.
Yep.
So I'm not aware of any jurisprudence involving a lawyer who disclosed confidential information and jeopardize in that way his client's intellectual property rights. No, I'm not aware. So it's quite safe to deal with the registered patent and trademark agents and lawyers. And I advise you to go, there is a link on our website where you can check the credentials of lawyers if they are registered in good standing.
Great. Yeah, and Siamak, if there's any more questions that you have, feel free to throw another one at us. All right. I have a question from Arundhati. If I have a patent in another country, can I transfer it to Canada, or would I have to reapply through Sipo? So basically, how do you transfer that? You're in one market, and then I want to go to Canada. So
the patent system works in that way, in the sense that you have to file simultaneously in all countries.
Right.
Your patent application. You have a so-called 1 year grace period. It's called convention priority year. When you apply, let's assume in that particular country, within 1 year, you apply in another country and you claim the filing date, the first filing date in the subsequent country. But all this has to happen within 1 year.
Okay.
And if a patent has issued in another country, you are not allowed to file or for the same thing in a different country. So you have to keep in mind how the patent system works worldwide.
Right.
There is an international system to file an international patent application called Patent Cooperation Treaty. you might consider that. So you start the process in one country, you designate countries all over the world, and you keep going with that international patent application until you fall in different country jurisdictions.
Interesting. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, that's great. So I don't see any other questions. I think we made it pretty clear. What is IP? Hopefully, but I really like the questions.
Don't worry. There are plenty of resources on Sipo website. I invite you. It's unbiased advice that you can get from us. So I suggest that we start with us, and we have information from very simple to more detailed and elaborate information.
Yes, great. Yeah. What else can we think of? Let's see. I just had another one come up. How can we earn from IP? That's
once it helps you with your business strategy, so you may raise the price because you have that kind of monopoly. So your profits will be higher. But you may also license your intellectual property. You can sell intellectual property. You make money this way. So it's a good practice to evaluate how valuable your intellectual property is, and then take the appropriate action. If you're not interested in, let's say, pursuing and keeping the intellectual property right while not selling to someone else for a good price.
Yeah, hence the, considering the IP as an asset, you can sell it. So another question, we usually see patent as the main leverage to raise capital, but from your experience, have you seen cases of use of just copyright and trademark for startup growth / acquiring funding?
Yeah, of course, trademarks might be even more valuable than patents sometimes. Copyright as well. So it depends on how it helps your business. Patenting is a risky business. Probably 5-10% of all patents are followed by commercial success. Keep that in mind. But you have lenders, you have banks that can give you money based on your intellectual property assets. They will try to evaluate your assets just to make sure that it's properly backed up by you. So that's
exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the secret to. You have to make your patent. If you make a patent, you have to make it as specific as you can. But then you may want to avoid certain areas that is the secret. Another layer of secrecy to it, to not make it too circumventable for other, because if you have a patent
that's a good
registered,
point. That's a very good point.
It's very open. Everyone can see what it entails, all the details, and if you don't mix in some secrecy in there, then it might be too circumventable. All right. I think that's it for questions. Last chance for questions here. We had quite a few that we answered, so that's good. It's a very interesting area.
Thank you very much for your interest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all right. I think, are we satisfied with that? I think we're pretty good.
Done with time as well.
But the time is coming up, and I want to be sensitive to that. But I would invite everyone to get in touch with either organization. We work together with Dumitru's Sipo and myself at Ontario Center of Innovation. We're working together, so it doesn't really matter, and we're here to help. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dumitru, for your expertise.
Well, thank you, Andreas.
Pleasure. And I'll hand it over to you, Shreya.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you to both of you for sharing all the insightful knowledge about IP strategy, and thank you to our attendees for asking very relevant and insightful questions. I have posted a quick survey in the chat. So for all the attendees, please send us forward your session feedback. You will be entered into a session draw for a $50 Windsor gift card, and the more sessions you enter into this draw, the more chances you have of winning. And before we close out the session, I'd just like to take a quick screenshot picture with our guests here. So if you could just smile on camera in the next 3 seconds. In 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. And to our attendees here today, please don't forget to check out your schedule for upcoming events. Next up, we have leveraging the WindsorEssex entrepreneurship support ecosystem at 3 p.m. where all of our partners will be presenting and sharing useful resources to help improve and scale your business. And also, we want to make sure you do not miss out on Founders Week YQG Town Hall tonight. I know Adam Fry has been working very hard to put that together for us, so please make sure that you come join us today at 6. And finally, Failure Night on Friday. Please make sure you add it to your schedule so you don't miss out. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.